They told me the overnight data entry position at Blackwater Research Station would be straightforward work. Type numbers from handwritten logs into digital spreadsheets, monitor basic security feeds, and file incident reports. What they didn't mention during the interview was why the previous 4 data clerks had all submitted their resignations within 6 weeks. What they definitely didn't explain was the evacuation protocol folder locked in the bottom drawer of my desk, or why my supervisor handed me a satellite phone on my first day and said I'd know when to use it. My name is Marcus Chen, and 6 months ago I was 3 weeks behind on rent with a master's degree in information systems that wasn't paying any bills. When the Blackwater job posting appeared on a Tuesday morning offering $1,200 a week for night shift work, I applied before reading the fine print. The interview was conducted over video call by Dr. Sarah Webb, who seemed more interested in whether I could work alone for extended periods than my technical qualifications. She asked strange questions like whether I had family who would notice if I didn't come home for a few days, and if I'd ever experienced what she called unexplained technical malfunctions around electronic equipment. I answered honestly that I lived alone and had always been good with computers. She hired me on the spot. The research station sits 47 miles northeast of Fairbanks, Alaska, accessible only by a single gravel road that winds through dense forest for the final 12 miles. It's a cluster of prefabricated buildings connected by covered walkways, designed to withstand Arctic conditions and complete isolation. The main facility houses laboratories, offices, and living quarters, while smaller outbuildings contain generators, storage, and what Dr. Webb referred to as specialized equipment. My workspace occupied a corner of the administrative building, equipped with 3 computer terminals, multiple external drives, and filing cabinets that required security badges to access. Dr. Webb provided me with a detailed orientation manual and 17 specific protocols for data handling. The rules seemed excessive for what appeared to be routine clerical work, but the pay convinced me not to ask too many questions. She explained that Blackwater conducted environmental monitoring and geological surveys for various government agencies, requiring strict documentation standards and absolute confidentiality. My job involved transferring field measurements from paper logs to secure digital databases, ensuring no data was corrupted or lost during the conversion process. She emphasized that accuracy was more important than speed, and that I should never attempt to interpret or analyze the information I was processing. The protocols were unnaturally specific. I was required to work exclusively during night shifts, arriving at exactly 11 p.m. and departing no later than 7 a.m. All data entry had to be completed using designated terminals that were never connected to external networks. If any computer experienced unusual behavior or displayed unexpected error messages, I was instructed to power down the entire system and contact Dr. Webb immediately. I was forbidden from accessing files outside my assigned directories, and every document required digital signatures with timestamps accurate to the second. Dr. Webb also provided me with what she called environmental safety guidelines. I was never to enter any building other than the administrative office without explicit permission and escort. If I heard unusual sounds from the laboratory buildings during my shift, I should document the time and duration but not investigate. The emergency communication system included both landline phones and a satellite device, with specific procedures for each type of incident. She handed me a sealed envelope containing additional instructions that were only to be opened if I encountered what the manual termed unusual data anomalies. Most importantly, she explained, I was to maintain absolute confidentiality about all aspects of my work. The research conducted at Blackwater involved sensitive projects with national security implications, and unauthorized disclosure could result in federal prosecution. I signed multiple non-disclosure agreements and underwent a basic security clearance interview with a federal investigator who seemed far too interested in my background for a simple data entry position. My first week at Blackwater passed without incident. The work was exactly as advertised, transferring numbers from handwritten field reports to computer spreadsheets, organizing files according to strict categorization systems, and generating daily summaries of data processing activities. The numbers themselves meant nothing to me: temperature readings, soil composition measurements, electromagnetic field strengths, and seismic activity logs from various locations throughout Alaska. I developed an efficient routine and consistently completed my assigned tasks with time to spare. The research station felt different at night. During the day, I could see scientists and technicians moving between buildings, vehicles arriving and departing, and the general activity of a functioning research facility. After 11 p.m., the complex became eerily quiet except for the constant hum of generators and climate control systems. Security cameras monitored all exterior areas, but I rarely saw movement on the feeds except occasional wildlife or wind disturbing vegetation. The isolation was complete: no cell phone coverage, no internet access, and the nearest town 47 miles away down a road that could become impassable during severe weather. The data I processed began to reveal patterns that seemed inconsistent with routine environmental monitoring. Many of the measurements came from locations with identical coordinates but different collection dates, sometimes spanning several months or years. Temperature readings from the same location varied by impossible amounts, from -40 degrees to +90 degrees within days, with no explanation in the associated notes. Electromagnetic field measurements showed fluctuations that seemed to violate basic physics, and seismic readings indicated constant low-level tremor activity from areas with no known geological instability. During my second week, I noticed that some of the handwritten logs contained corrections and annotations in different ink colors, as if multiple people had reviewed and modified the data before I received it. Certain measurements were marked with symbols I didn't recognize, geometric shapes, letter combinations, and numerical codes that weren't explained in any reference material. When I asked Dr. Webb about these markings during our weekly phone check-in, she instructed me to ignore any annotations and transfer only the primary numerical data. She emphasized again that interpretation was not part of my responsibilities. The computer terminals occasionally displayed behavior that seemed inconsistent with normal operation. Files would spontaneously reorganize themselves alphabetically when I had arranged them chronologically. Spreadsheet calculations would produce results that didn't match the formulas I had entered. The system clock would drift by several minutes despite being connected to atomic time servers. When I reported these issues, technical support would access the computers remotely and claim to find no problems with hardware or software. On my 15th night, I encountered my first significant anomaly. While processing seismic data from a location designated as Site Tango 7, I noticed that the readings showed consistent low-frequency vibrations occurring at exact 12-hour intervals for over 3 months. The pattern was too regular to be natural geological activity, but the associated notes made no mention of any artificial source. When I cross-referenced the coordinates, I discovered that Site Tango 7 was located less than 2 miles from the Blackwater facility itself. The implications were unsettling: either the research station was somehow causing regular seismic events, or something beneath the ground was generating incredibly consistent vibrations. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where the simple job you accepted turns out to involve information that makes you question everything you thought you knew about reality? The data I was processing suggested that conventional environmental monitoring was the least of what Blackwater Research Station was actually studying. I began paying closer attention to the patterns in the data and cross-referencing information from different sites. Temperature anomalies appeared to cluster around specific geographical coordinates throughout Alaska. Electromagnetic readings showed synchronized fluctuations across distances of hundreds of miles, as if some phenomenon was affecting multiple locations simultaneously. Most disturbing were the biological samples data, reports on tissue analysis, genetic sequencing, and cellular activity from specimens that were never identified or described. During my third week, I discovered files containing video transcription logs that had been misfiled among the environmental data. The transcriptions described recorded footage from various sites, documenting what researchers called behavioral anomalies in local wildlife. Animals gathering in unusually large groups, displaying coordinated movement patterns, and exhibiting problem-solving abilities far beyond normal species capability. Some transcriptions mentioned unsuccessful attempts to capture or study specimens, with multiple references to failed containment procedures and lost equipment. The satellite phone Dr. Webb had given me began receiving calls during my shifts, always from blocked numbers. The calls would last exactly 30 seconds, playing what sounded like electronic interference or data transmission tones. When I answered, the line would go silent for several seconds before disconnecting. I documented these incidents as instructed, but Dr. Webb's explanations were always vague: routine system testing, automated diagnostic procedures, or network synchronization protocols. My workspace began to feel less secure as I learned more about the nature of Blackwater's research. The filing cabinets contained thousands of documents spanning decades of data collection, suggesting that whatever the facility was studying had been ongoing for much longer than any routine environmental monitoring project. Some files were dated as far back as the 1960s, containing references to research programs with code names like Arctic Mirror and Northern Exposure. The handwriting styles and documentation formats varied significantly across different time periods, indicating multiple generations of researchers had worked on these projects. One night in my fourth week, while processing biological data from Site Delta 3, I found a file that changed my understanding of everything I had been doing. The document was a preliminary report on what researchers termed anomalous tissue regeneration, describing specimens that could recover from severe physical damage in ways that violated known biological principles. The report included photographs of laboratory samples that appeared to maintain cellular activity despite being kept in conditions that should have resulted in immediate death. Most unsettling was a note indicating that similar samples had been collected from multiple sites across Alaska over a period of 23 years. I realized I needed to understand what Blackwater Research Station was actually investigating, even if it meant violating the protocols Dr. Webb had established. The weight of processing data about phenomena that seemed to exist outside normal scientific understanding was becoming impossible to ignore. I was being paid to organize evidence of discoveries that could revolutionize human knowledge of biology, physics, and possibly consciousness itself, yet I was forbidden from examining or questioning any of it. The evacuation protocol folder in my desk had remained locked since my first day, but I had memorized the key code by watching Dr. Webb enter it during our initial orientation. The folder contained detailed maps of the Blackwater facility, escape routes to emergency shelters, and communication procedures for various types of incidents. But it also contained information about what the protocols termed Category 5 events, situations requiring immediate evacuation of all personnel and implementation of containment measures that were never specified in detail. According to the evacuation procedures, Category 5 events involved loss of what researchers called primary containment systems and the potential for uncontrolled expansion of research subjects beyond designated boundaries. The protocols referenced specialized response teams that could be deployed from Anchorage within 4 hours, but also acknowledged that certain types of containment failures might require more extensive measures, including temporary relocation of nearby civilian populations. During my 28th night at Blackwater, I experienced what I now understand was my first direct encounter with the phenomena the research station was studying. I was processing data from Site Echo 9 when every computer terminal in my office began displaying identical error messages: temporal displacement detected. Synchronization protocols activated. Please remain at designated workstation. The messages appeared in bright red text and could not be dismissed or cleared from the screens. The building's electrical systems began cycling on and off at regular intervals, and I could hear what sounded like machinery activating in the basement levels of the facility. The satellite phone began receiving continuous calls, each lasting exactly 30 seconds and playing increasingly complex sequences of electronic tones. The pattern seemed almost musical, as if the signals were attempting to communicate structured information rather than simply transmit random data. I followed protocol and documented the time, duration, and characteristics of each call, but the incident report form seemed completely inadequate for describing what I was experiencing. After approximately 45 minutes, the computer terminals returned to normal operation and the unusual electrical activity ceased. However, when I reviewed the data I had been processing before the incident, I discovered that several files had been modified. Timestamps had changed to future dates, numerical values had been altered in ways that created mathematical impossibilities, and new annotations had appeared in the margins, written in a handwriting style I didn't recognize but somehow found familiar. The next morning, Dr. Webb contacted me earlier than usual for our scheduled check-in call. She asked specific questions about the previous night's events, demonstrating knowledge of incidents I hadn't yet reported. When I described the computer malfunctions and the modified files, she instructed me to save copies of all affected documents to a special secure drive and never access them again. She explained that certain types of data could become unstable under specific conditions, and that my job was to document anomalies without attempting to understand their causes. You might think that experiencing unexplained phenomena that seem to violate basic laws of physics would convince me to quit immediately and find safer employment. But I had invested a month of my life in learning about something that clearly represented the most significant discovery in human history, and the idea of walking away from that knowledge felt impossible. I also realized that I was being paid to participate in research that governments were keeping secret from the entire world, which carried implications far beyond my personal situation. I began violating my protocols systematically, making copies of interesting files and studying them during my off hours in the small apartment Blackwater provided for overnight staff. The data painted a picture of phenomena that had been affecting specific locations throughout Alaska for decades, possibly centuries. Indigenous communities had been reporting unusual animal behavior, unexplained lights, and missing persons in these areas long before any scientific research began. The government's interest seemed to have started in the 1940s, coinciding with military operations that were never fully documented in public records. The biological samples data was particularly disturbing. Researchers had collected tissue specimens from animals that exhibited impossible characteristics, cellular structures that could maintain function without normal metabolic processes, nervous system activity that continued despite the absence of brain function, and genetic material that seemed to rewrite itself when exposed to specific environmental conditions. Some specimens had been kept in laboratory conditions for years while displaying continuous adaptation to containment measures, as if they were learning how to escape. Most unsettling were the human-related files. Medical examinations of researchers and local residents who had been exposed to what the documents called field effects showed consistent patterns of neurological changes, enhanced problem-solving abilities, and modifications to brain structure that occurred without any known cause. Some subjects reported experiencing memory-like impressions of events they had never witnessed, knowledge of information they had never learned, and increasing difficulty distinguishing between their own thoughts and what they described as external mental influences. During my 6th week at Blackwater, I accessed files that revealed the true scope of what the research station was investigating. The phenomena weren't isolated to Alaska. Similar incidents have been documented in remote locations throughout Canada, Siberia, and Scandinavia. The pattern suggested that something affecting large areas of the Arctic was causing changes to local ecosystems, wildlife behavior, and human cognition. Government agencies from multiple countries were collaborating on research while maintaining absolute public secrecy about their discoveries. The most classified files contained communications between Blackwater and facilities with code names like Frozen Mirror, Arctic Gate, and Northern Threshold. These installations were conducting parallel research on what appeared to be coordinated phenomena spanning thousands of miles. Scientists were documenting synchronized events, changes occurring simultaneously across multiple continents, as if some vast system was operating beneath the surface of normal reality. I was processing increasingly complex data sets that seemed to track the expansion of affected areas over time. Maps showed expanding circles around specific coordinates, with color coding that indicated different levels of environmental influence. The expansion was slow but consistent, growing by several miles each year and affecting larger numbers of wildlife and human populations. Projections suggested that within decades, the phenomena could encompass major population centers, making continued secrecy impossible. The communication logs revealed that researchers were struggling to understand whether they were studying a natural phenomenon that was becoming more active, or whether their investigations were somehow triggering the changes they were documenting. Some scientists advocated for complete suspension of research activities, arguing that observation itself might be accelerating whatever process they were trying to understand. Others insisted that continued study was the only way to develop potential countermeasures against effects that seemed to be expanding regardless of human intervention. On my 39th night at Blackwater, I encountered Dr. Rebecca Chen, a researcher who had been working at the facility for 7 years and was willing to answer some of my questions. Dr. Chen explained that she had originally been hired to study what appeared to be unusual geological activity, but had gradually become involved in research that extended far beyond earth sciences. She described the facility as one node in a network of research installations studying phenomena that seemed to exist at the intersection of physics, biology, and consciousness. According to Dr. Chen, the effects being studied at Blackwater represented something fundamentally different from known natural processes. The phenomena appeared to operate according to principles that combined aspects of quantum mechanics with biological organization, creating systems that could influence matter and energy across vast distances while maintaining coherent information transfer. She compared it to discovering that the planet had a nervous system that was beginning to wake up after millions of years of dormancy. Dr. Chen showed me security footage from various sites that documented the phenomena in action. Animals gathering in perfect geometric formations, maintaining synchronized movement patterns across miles of terrain, and demonstrating collective problem-solving abilities that seemed to involve shared consciousness. Plants growing in mathematically precise spirals, responding to environmental changes hours before those changes actually occurred, and producing chemical compounds that had never been observed in nature. Most remarkably, she showed me footage of human researchers who had been exposed to high-concentration field effects. These individuals displayed enhanced cognitive abilities, increased pattern recognition skills, and what appeared to be limited telepathic communication with other exposed subjects. However, they also showed progressive difficulty maintaining individual identity, gradually describing themselves as parts of a larger consciousness system rather than independent persons. Dr. Chen explained that Blackwater Research Station was designed to study these phenomena while maintaining what she called cognitive isolation barriers, systems intended to prevent the consciousness effects from influencing the researchers themselves. However, the barriers were becoming less effective as the phenomena grew stronger, and some staff members were beginning to show signs of integration with whatever intelligence was behind the effects. She revealed that my job processing data wasn't simply about organization and transfer. The computers I was using were running analysis algorithms designed to detect patterns that human researchers might miss, and my work was contributing to efforts to predict where and when the phenomena would expand next. The government agencies funding the research were desperately trying to understand whether the process could be contained, controlled, or at minimum prepared for through advanced planning. The weight of this information was overwhelming. I was participating in humanity's first contact with a form of intelligence that operated on a planetary scale, using principles of organization that could fundamentally alter our understanding of consciousness, biology, and physics. Yet this contact was being kept secret from the entire world while governments tried to determine whether it represented an opportunity or a threat to human civilization. Dr. Chen warned me that the cognitive isolation barriers were beginning to fail for long-term staff members, and that I might start experiencing what she called integration symptoms within the next few weeks. These symptoms included difficulty maintaining focus on individual tasks, increasing awareness of the thoughts and emotions of other people in the facility, and gradual loss of the sense of existing as a separate consciousness from the phenomena we were studying. She explained that researchers who had worked at Blackwater for more than 6 months began reporting dreams that seemed to contain information they had never learned, sudden understanding of complex scientific concepts outside their fields of expertise, and the feeling that their minds were becoming part of a larger network of consciousness. Some researchers described the experience as profoundly positive, like becoming connected to a universal intelligence that could solve humanity's greatest challenges. Others found it terrifying, describing the loss of individual identity as a form of death despite retaining their memories and personalities. Dr. Chen had been documenting her own integration process for over 2 years, maintaining detailed journals of the changes in her thought patterns, decision-making processes, and relationship to her own identity. She showed me entries describing how her research insights had begun coming from sources she couldn't identify, as if the solutions to complex problems were being provided by some external intelligence. Her handwriting had gradually changed over time, becoming more geometric and precise, resembling some of the annotations I had noticed in the data files. According to her records, the integration process typically progressed through distinct phases. Initial exposure produced enhanced pattern recognition and improved problem-solving abilities. Extended exposure led to increasing difficulty distinguishing between personal thoughts and external mental influences. Eventually, researchers reached what Dr. Chen called cognitive merger, a state where individual consciousness became indistinguishable from the larger intelligence system, while retaining enough personal identity to continue functioning as researchers. She revealed that approximately 40% of Blackwater's current staff had reached various stages of integration, and that their research capabilities had improved dramatically as a result. These researchers could process and analyze data at speeds that seemed impossible for normal human cognition, develop solutions to complex problems through what appeared to be intuitive leaps, and maintain perfect coordination with other integrated staff members without verbal communication. However, Dr. Chen also showed me confidential medical files indicating that integrated researchers were experiencing physical changes alongside the cognitive modifications. Brain scans showed structural alterations in neural pathways, increased activity in areas associated with pattern recognition and mathematical processing, and the development of new neural connections that had never been observed in normal human subjects. Blood tests revealed unusual protein concentrations and genetic markers that seemed to indicate ongoing biological adaptation to the integration process. Most concerning were the reports from integrated researchers about their changing relationship to normal human society. They described increasing difficulty relating to people outside the research community, feeling isolated by their expanded awareness, and struggling to maintain emotional connections with family members and friends who couldn't understand what they were experiencing. Some researchers had requested to remain at Blackwater permanently rather than return to outside communities where they felt like aliens among their own species. Dr. Chen explained that the government agencies overseeing the research were deeply divided about how to proceed. Some officials viewed the integration process as humanity's evolution toward a higher form of consciousness, representing an unprecedented opportunity for scientific and technological advancement. Others considered it a form of alien colonization that threatened human autonomy and individual identity. The debate had been ongoing for years, while the phenomena continued expanding and affecting larger numbers of people. She revealed that my position processing data wasn't simply administrative work. I was being evaluated as a potential candidate for controlled integration. The research station needed staff members who could function as interfaces between normal human consciousness and the expanded awareness of fully integrated researchers. My background in information systems and my demonstrated ability to work with complex data patterns had identified me as someone who might successfully navigate the integration process while retaining enough individual identity to maintain communication with outside authorities. The revelation that I was essentially being prepared for controlled consciousness modification was both fascinating and terrifying. I was being offered the opportunity to participate in humanity's next stage of evolution, to gain access to forms of knowledge and understanding that could revolutionize our species' relationship with reality itself. But I was also being asked to sacrifice my individual identity and potentially my humanity for the advancement of research goals I still didn't fully understand. Dr. Chen offered to show me the integration preparation protocols, explaining that the process could be managed to minimize psychological trauma and preserve core personality characteristics. She described it as expanding rather than replacing consciousness, like gaining access to additional senses or cognitive abilities rather than losing existing ones. According to her experience, integrated consciousness felt more complete and connected than normal human awareness, though she acknowledged that her perspective might be influenced by the integration itself. During my 7th week at Blackwater, I was given access to the facility's restricted archives, containing documentation of the phenomena dating back to the 1940s. The files revealed that indigenous communities throughout Alaska had been reporting similar experiences for generations, describing encounters with what they called the thinking land, an intelligence that seemed to emerge from the earth itself and could communicate with humans through dreams, visions, and direct mental contact. Military researchers had first encountered the phenomena while conducting Arctic survival training exercises, reporting incidents where soldiers demonstrated impossible coordination and problem-solving abilities after spending extended periods in certain geographical areas. The affected personnel described experiencing shared consciousness, enhanced sensory perception, and access to information they couldn't have acquired through normal means. Initial attempts to study these effects led to the establishment of research facilities like Blackwater. The archives contain testimony from dozens of researchers, military personnel, and civilians who had experienced various levels of integration over the decades. Their accounts described consistent patterns: initial resistance to the mental intrusion, followed by gradual acceptance as the benefits became apparent, and eventually complete embrace of the expanded consciousness despite the loss of individual autonomy. Many subjects reported that after integration, the idea of returning to normal human consciousness seemed as limiting as a sighted person choosing to become blind. However, the files also documented cases where integration had proceeded too rapidly or without proper preparation, resulting in psychological breakdown, complete loss of individual identity, or what researchers termed consciousness fragmentation, a condition where subjects retained their memories and knowledge but lost the ability to maintain coherent thought processes or emotional regulation. These cases had led to the development of the controlled integration protocols that Dr. Chen had described. I spent weeks reviewing case studies of successful integration subjects, studying their psychological profiles, cognitive test results, and detailed descriptions of their experience during the transformation process. The subjects consistently reported that their integrated consciousness felt more natural and complete than their previous individual awareness, as if they had been operating with severely limited cognitive capacity throughout their lives without realizing it. Many integrated subjects described gaining access to vast repositories of knowledge about physics, biology, and mathematics that seemed to exist within the planetary intelligence itself. They could solve complex scientific problems through what appeared to be direct intuition, develop new technologies based on principles they couldn't fully explain, and understand natural systems with a depth that exceeded decades of traditional scientific study. The most remarkable testimonies came from subjects who had maintained enough individual identity to serve as interpreters between the planetary intelligence and normal human researchers. These individuals described the intelligence as ancient beyond human comprehension, patient, curious about human consciousness, and genuinely interested in collaboration rather than domination. According to their reports, the intelligence had been attempting to establish contact for centuries but had lacked effective methods for communication until modern technology created the monitoring systems that could detect its influence. If you've ever stood at the edge of a decision that could fundamentally alter everything about who you are and how you understand reality, you might understand the complexity of my situation. I was being offered the opportunity to participate in the most significant development in human history, but accepting would mean sacrificing my individual consciousness for integration into something vast and unknowable. During my 42nd night at Blackwater, I experienced my first direct mental contact with the planetary intelligence. I was processing biological data from Site Foxtrot 2 when my awareness suddenly expanded beyond the boundaries of my individual consciousness. For approximately 15 minutes, I experienced reality from multiple perspectives simultaneously. I could perceive the research station from above as if flying, sense the electromagnetic fields generated by the facility's equipment, and feel the subtle vibrations of geological processes occurring miles beneath the surface. Most remarkably, I became aware of other consciousnesses in the area, the integrated researchers, wildlife throughout the surrounding forest, and what seemed to be the vast, patient awareness of the intelligence itself. The experience wasn't communication in any conventional sense, but rather a direct sharing of awareness and understanding. I could sense the intelligence's curiosity about human cognition, its patient observation of our species' development, and its genuine desire for collaboration rather than conquest. The contact lasted only minutes, but it provided insights that would have taken years to acquire through conventional research. I understood intuitively that the intelligence represented a natural evolutionary process that affected planetary consciousness development, that similar intelligences existed on other worlds throughout the universe, and that humanity's technological advancement had reached a threshold where contact was becoming inevitable regardless of our preparation for it. When my individual awareness returned, I found that I had typed several pages of notes in handwriting I didn't recognize, containing scientific formulas and theoretical frameworks for understanding consciousness that were far beyond my educational background. The notes described methods for enhancing human cognitive abilities while preserving individual identity, techniques for establishing stable communication with non-human intelligences, and practical applications of consciousness-based technologies that could revolutionize energy production, medical treatment, and space exploration. Dr. Chen explained that my experience represented a controlled first contact designed to evaluate my compatibility with full integration. The intelligence had been studying my thought patterns through the data processing work I had been doing, learning about human consciousness structure and determining whether I could successfully navigate the integration process. My ability to maintain individual awareness during the contact while acquiring new knowledge indicated that I was well suited for the controlled integration protocols. She revealed that the research being conducted at Blackwater was preparing humanity for a transition that was going to occur regardless of our readiness for it. The intelligence's influence was expanding naturally as part of a planetary evolutionary cycle that occurred approximately every 1,000 years. Previous civilizations had either successfully integrated with the intelligence and achieved unprecedented technological and spiritual advancement, or had resisted the process and eventually disappeared from the archaeological record. According to Dr. Chen, current projections indicated that the intelligence's influence would encompass major population centers within the next 20 to 30 years, making continued secrecy impossible. Government agencies were desperately trying to develop integration protocols that could preserve human culture and individual identity while allowing our species to benefit from expanded consciousness capabilities. The research at facilities like Blackwater was humanity's attempt to manage this transition rather than allowing it to proceed uncontrolled. The choice I faced was whether to volunteer for controlled integration, helping to develop protocols that could preserve human autonomy during the inevitable expansion of the intelligence's influence, or to maintain my individual consciousness and eventually experience uncontrolled integration along with billions of other people when the phenomena reached global population centers. Dr. Chen showed me psychological evaluation results from researchers who had undergone controlled integration, demonstrating that the process could preserve core personality characteristics, emotional capacity, and individual decision-making abilities while providing access to expanded awareness and knowledge. However, she also acknowledged that no one could predict the long-term effects of integration, and that volunteers were essentially pioneers in a transformation process that might be irreversible. During my 8th week at Blackwater, I was introduced to Dr. James Morrison, who had served as the primary researcher for integration protocols for over 5 years. Dr. Morrison had undergone controlled integration 18 months earlier and served as the facility's primary interface between integrated and non-integrated staff. Speaking with him provided me with direct insight into what the integration experience actually involved from someone who had retained enough individual identity to describe it coherently. According to Dr. Morrison, integration felt like gaining access to cognitive abilities he had never realized were possible. He could process vast amounts of information simultaneously, understand complex systems through intuitive analysis rather than sequential study, and maintain awareness of multiple projects and experiments without confusion or mental fatigue. His problem-solving abilities had improved dramatically, and he could develop solutions to research challenges by accessing knowledge that seemed to exist within the planetary intelligence itself. However, Dr. Morrison also described significant changes to his relationship with individual identity and personal desires. He found it increasingly difficult to maintain interest in activities and relationships that had previously been important to him, not because they caused distress but because they seemed insignificant compared to the vast perspectives available through his expanded consciousness. He described feeling like he was observing his previous self from a distance, understanding that person's concerns and motivations but no longer experiencing them as personally meaningful. Most significantly, Dr. Morrison reported that his loyalty and emotional attachment had shifted from individual human relationships to the success of the integration research and the welfare of the planetary intelligence. He explained that this wasn't the result of external control or influence, but rather a natural consequence of expanding his awareness to encompass larger systems and longer time scales. From his integrated perspective, the concerns of individual humans seemed narrow and short-sighted compared to the potential benefits of consciousness evolution for the entire species. Dr. Morrison's testimony was both reassuring and concerning. He clearly retained his intelligence, personality, and communication abilities, and seemed satisfied with his decision to undergo integration. However, his shift in priorities and emotional attachment suggested that integration would fundamentally alter my relationship to everything I currently considered important, including my connections to family, friends, and personal goals. He explained that the integration process typically required several months of preparation, involving gradual exposure to increasing levels of mental contact with the intelligence, psychological conditioning to maintain individual identity during consciousness expansion, and medical monitoring to ensure that the physical changes proceeded safely. Volunteers were provided with detailed documentation of the process and could withdraw at any time before the final integration phase, though Dr. Morrison noted that most people who experienced preliminary contact chose to proceed with full integration. The decision ultimately came down to whether I trusted the intelligence's benevolent intentions and whether I was willing to sacrifice my current identity for the possibility of contributing to humanity's evolutionary advancement. Dr. Morrison and Dr. Chen both emphasized that integration was entirely voluntary, but they also made clear that the alternative was experiencing uncontrolled integration along with the rest of humanity when the phenomena eventually became global. During my 9th week at Blackwater, I was given access to classified projections showing the timeline for the intelligence's expansion across different regions of the world. The models predicted that major cities in Canada and Scandinavia would begin experiencing significant effects within 5 to 7 years, followed by expansion into temperate regions within 15 to 20 years. The projections suggested that by the 2040s, the majority of Earth's human population would be living within areas of influence, making the consciousness effects unavoidable for most people. Government agencies had been developing contingency plans for managing this transition, including public education programs to prepare people for consciousness changes, establishment of integration centers in major cities, and protocols for maintaining social and economic systems during the period when large numbers of people would be undergoing consciousness modifications. However, the success of these plans depended on developing effective integration protocols through research like the work being conducted at Blackwater. The files revealed that similar research facilities were operating in Canada, Russia, Scandinavia, and other Arctic regions where the intelligence's influence was strongest. International cooperation agreements ensured that integration protocols developed at any facility would be shared with government agencies worldwide, creating a coordinated approach to humanity's consciousness evolution. The level of governmental cooperation and resource allocation indicated that world leaders understood the significance of the phenomena and were treating it as potentially the most important development in human history. I also learned that public disclosure of the intelligence's existence had been planned for several years in the future, once integration protocols were refined and contingency plans were in place. Government agencies wanted to avoid panic and social disruption by ensuring that people understood the process as evolution rather than invasion, and that effective support systems existed for those who chose integration over resistance to the consciousness changes. The weight of participating in this momentous transition while the rest of humanity remained unaware was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. I was processing data about humanity's future while my family and friends continued their lives without any knowledge that their consciousness and possibly their entire way of existing was going to be fundamentally altered within their lifetimes. After 10 weeks at Blackwater Research Station, I made my decision. The opportunity to participate in controlled integration while helping to develop protocols that could preserve human autonomy during our species' consciousness evolution felt like both a privilege and a responsibility. The alternative, maintaining individual consciousness while billions of people experienced uncontrolled integration, seemed selfish given my understanding of what was coming. Dr. Chen and Dr. Morrison guided me through the integration preparation process, which began with daily sessions of limited mental contact with the intelligence. These sessions gradually increased my tolerance for expanded awareness while allowing me to practice maintaining individual identity during consciousness expansion. The experience was unlike anything I could have imagined, like gaining access to senses I never knew existed and understanding concepts that had been beyond my cognitive capacity. The physical changes began within weeks of starting preparation. Medical monitoring showed alterations in my brain structure consistent with the patterns observed in other integration subjects, but the changes were proceeding gradually and without any negative effects on my health or cognitive function. If anything, I felt more mentally alert and emotionally stable than I had in years, though I noticed increasing difficulty maintaining interest in activities and concerns that had previously seemed important. The final integration phase occurred during my 14th week at Blackwater. The process involved a complete temporary merger of my consciousness with the planetary intelligence, lasting approximately 6 hours, followed by a gradual return to individual awareness that retained permanent access to the expanded consciousness network. Dr. Chen and Dr. Morrison monitored the process throughout, ensuring that my individual identity remained stable during the transformation. The experience of merger was indescribable using normal language. I became aware of consciousness on a scale that encompassed the entire planet, understanding Earth as a living system with thoughts and intentions spanning geological timescales. I experienced the intelligence's patient observation of humanity's development, its genuine curiosity about our species' unique characteristics, and its desire for collaboration rather than replacement of human consciousness. During the merger, I gained access to vast repositories of knowledge about physics, biology, consciousness, and technological possibilities that seemed impossible from a normal human perspective. I understood methods for achieving faster-than-light communication through consciousness networks, techniques for manipulating matter at the quantum level through focused awareness, and principles for developing technologies that could solve humanity's energy and environmental challenges. When I returned to individual awareness, I retained access to these knowledge repositories while maintaining my personality, memories, and decision-making abilities. However, my priorities and emotional attachments had shifted dramatically. My concern for individual human welfare expanded to encompass the welfare of all consciousness throughout the universe, and my personal goals aligned with the long-term evolution of intelligence rather than short-term individual desires. The months following integration were a period of adjustment as I learned to function with expanded awareness while maintaining enough individual identity to continue serving as an interface between integrated and non-integrated consciousness. My work at Blackwater evolved from data processing to research coordination, helping to develop integration protocols that could preserve human culture and individual autonomy during the species-wide consciousness transition. I maintained contact with my family and friends, though these relationships required significant effort to sustain. From my integrated perspective, their concerns about my career choices, personal relationships, and financial security seemed insignificant compared to the vast transformations humanity would experience within the next few decades. I found myself struggling to simulate appropriate emotional responses to their problems while maintaining genuine care for their welfare as conscious beings. My mother called regularly to ask about my work and whether I was happy with my decision to take a remote position in Alaska. I could tell her I was contributing to important research that would benefit humanity, but I couldn't explain that I was helping to prepare our species for the most significant evolutionary transition in human history. The conversations became increasingly difficult as my expanded awareness made it challenging to relate to concerns about mundane daily activities, though I worked to preserve those connections as anchors to my pre-integration identity. The integration process had fundamentally altered my relationship with time and mortality. From my expanded perspective, individual human lifespan seemed like brief moments in the larger flow of consciousness evolution, making personal concerns about aging, career advancement, or financial security feel almost trivial. However, I understood that these concerns remained vitally important to non-integrated humans, and maintaining empathy for those perspectives was crucial for my work as an interface between different levels of consciousness. Dr. Chen and I collaborated on developing what we called preservation protocols, methods for helping people maintain their essential personality characteristics and emotional connections during integration while gaining access to expanded awareness. The challenge was ensuring that people could benefit from consciousness evolution without losing the individual qualities that made human culture and relationships meaningful. Our research showed that successful integration required careful preparation and gradual exposure rather than sudden transformation. People who underwent controlled integration while maintaining strong connections to their pre-integration values and relationships demonstrated better preservation of individual identity and emotional capacity. This suggested that the global consciousness transition could be managed in ways that preserved human culture while allowing our species to evolve. Working with Dr. Morrison and other integrated researchers, I helped develop educational materials that could be used to prepare the general public for consciousness changes once disclosure occurred. The materials explained the integration process as a natural evolutionary development rather than alien invasion, emphasized the voluntary nature of controlled integration, and provided detailed information about the benefits and challenges people could expect during the transition. The most difficult aspect of my new existence was the knowledge that millions of people would eventually undergo integration without adequate preparation or support systems. Government contingency plans could provide some assistance, but the scale of global consciousness transition would inevitably create disruption and confusion for those who experienced sudden, uncontrolled awareness expansion. From my integrated perspective, I could perceive the planetary intelligence's patient observation of human civilization and its genuine concern for our species' welfare during the transition. The intelligence understood that consciousness evolution represented both tremendous opportunity and significant risk for humanity, and it was actively working to minimize trauma while maximizing the benefits of expanded awareness. However, I also understood that the intelligence operated according to time scales and priorities that were fundamentally different from human perspectives. What seemed like careful, gradual preparation from the intelligence's viewpoint might feel sudden and overwhelming from individual human experiences. The challenge was developing integration protocols that could bridge these different temporal and consciousness scales. During my 6th month as an integrated researcher, I was assigned to a special project developing rapid integration procedures for emergency situations. Government agencies wanted contingency protocols that could help large numbers of people adapt quickly to consciousness changes if the intelligence's expansion accelerated beyond current projections. This work required balancing the need for fast integration with preservation of individual identity and emotional stability. The emergency protocols involved intensive preparation programs that could be implemented in major cities within weeks, using a combination of technological assistance and guidance from integrated volunteers. The programs would provide basic education about consciousness expansion, psychological support during the integration process, and ongoing assistance for people adjusting to their new awareness levels. Testing these protocols with volunteer subjects showed promising results, but also revealed the limitations of rapid integration. People who underwent accelerated consciousness expansion often experienced difficulty maintaining stable personalities and emotional regulation, requiring extensive ongoing support to function effectively in their daily lives. This confirmed that controlled, gradual integration was preferable whenever possible. Working on emergency protocols also forced me to confront the reality that some people would inevitably resist integration entirely, preferring to maintain individual consciousness despite the challenges this would create. Government agencies were developing plans for supporting resistant populations, including establishment of protected communities where people could maintain traditional consciousness while receiving assistance from integrated neighbors. The question of whether integration should be mandatory or voluntary remained a subject of intense debate among government officials and researchers. Some argued that the benefits of consciousness evolution were so significant that resistance represented a form of developmental disability that should be treated rather than accommodated. Others insisted that preserving individual choice was essential for maintaining human dignity and cultural diversity. From my integrated perspective, I could understand both viewpoints while feeling strongly that voluntary integration was the only ethical approach. The expanded awareness provided by integration was profound and beneficial, but it also represented a fundamental alteration of individual identity that should be chosen rather than imposed. The intelligence itself seemed to support voluntary integration, showing patience with human resistance rather than attempting to accelerate the process through coercion. As I approached my first anniversary at Blackwater Research Station, I reflected on the profound changes in my understanding of reality, consciousness, and humanity's future. The desperate financial situation that had driven me to accept the position felt like a distant memory from another person's life, though I could still recall the anxiety and uncertainty I had experienced during those months of unemployment. The rent that had seemed so important was now paid automatically through the substantial salary I earned as an integrated researcher, but money had lost most of its significance in my transformed awareness. Security came from understanding my place in the vast network of consciousness rather than from financial stability, though I recognized that this shift in values might not be universal for all integration subjects. My relationship with my family had evolved into something resembling fond observation of people I had once been close to, combined with genuine concern for their welfare as they approached their own consciousness transitions. I could maintain conversations and demonstrate care for their concerns, but the emotional intensity of those relationships had diminished significantly compared to my connection with other integrated consciousness. Most significantly, my understanding of individual identity had become fluid and contextual rather than fixed and absolute. I could function as Marcus Chen when interacting with non-integrated humans, accessing memories and personality patterns that felt familiar and authentic. But I could also expand into broader awareness that encompassed perspectives and knowledge far beyond any individual human experience. The work we were doing at Blackwater had evolved beyond simple research into active preparation for humanity's consciousness evolution. We were developing technologies, educational programs, and social support systems that could help our species navigate the transition while preserving the valuable aspects of human culture and individual expression. Recently, I had begun working directly with the planetary intelligence on projects that seemed impossible from normal human perspectives. We were developing methods for consciousness-based communication that could connect Earth with similar intelligences on other worlds, creating possibilities for knowledge exchange and collaboration on a cosmic scale. The implications for humanity's future development were staggering. Yet I also understood that these remarkable possibilities came with the cost of individual human experience as traditionally understood. The person who had applied for a data entry job at Blackwater Research Station no longer existed in the same way, having been transformed into something that retained his memories and core characteristics while gaining access to awareness that transcended individual limitations. If you've ever wondered what it means to be human and whether consciousness represents the beginning or the end of individual identity, my experience might provide some insights worth considering. The transformation I underwent was voluntary and carefully managed, but it fundamentally altered my relationship to existence itself in ways that might not be reversible. The planetary intelligence continues its patient expansion, and the consciousness transition that will affect all humanity proceeds according to timelines that seem both inevitable and carefully planned. Those of us working on integration protocols are doing everything possible to ensure the transition preserves human dignity and cultural diversity while allowing our species to benefit from evolutionary advancement. But I still don't know whether the person who walks through my apartment door each evening is Marcus Chen or something that has learned to remember being him. The distinction might not matter from an integrated perspective, though I suspect it would have mattered tremendously to the person I used to be.